The alien princess believed her empire was untouchable. Then the humans arrived. The explosion ripped through my forward sensor array, before I even had time to issue an order. I grabbed the edge of my command throne as my flagship, the Eternal Saranthus, lurched hard to port. Alarms screamed across every panel. My crew scrambled in controlled chaos, voices overlapping, fingers flying over consoles. Through the main viewport, I watched one of my escort cruisers fold in half and break apart like a dry leaf, spinning silently into the dark. I am Princess Valith Saranthus, crown heir to the Drakari Eternal Empire, ruler of 300 systems, daughter of a dynasty 4,000 years old. I have never watched one of my ships die before, not once, not in my entire 30-year reign. I had been told this campaign would last 6 days. It had been 6 months. My tactical officer, a sharp-featured male named Drevith, turned from his station with something in his eyes I had not seen on a Drakari face in living memory. It took me a moment to name it. Fear. Pure, undecorated fear. They came from the asteroid field, Your Highness, he said. They were hiding inside the rocks, cold running. No emissions. We did not detect them until they fired. I forced my voice to stay level. How many? 40 vessels. No, 60. The count is still rising. My empire had sent 12 warships to claim this system at the start. Standard procedure. We had colonized 40 worlds that way. 12 ships, a demand of surrender, and within a week the locals were processing our minerals and learning our language. The 12 ships never came back. We sent 40. Then Admiral Mareth with 60. Mareth limped home with 11, and her first words were not an apology, they were a warning. I had not listened carefully enough. Now I stood at the front myself, commanding a fleet of 120 warships, the largest force the Drakari had committed to a single engagement in 2 centuries. I had come personally because my war council was fracturing, because Fleet Lord Asuvian was arguing for total planetary destruction, because something in my gut had told me that glassing a species we barely understood would be a mistake we could not take back, and because of the prisoner. Her name was Sergeant Laura Higgins. We had captured her 4 months ago during a boarding action near their 3rd moon. She was medium height, brown-haired, with a deep cut along her left jaw that she had stitched closed herself, using thread pulled from the lining of her uniform. When my guards brought her before me, she did not beg. She did not weep. She sat down in the chair without being told to, and looked at me with the calm, measuring gaze of someone solving a problem. She asked me how long our ships took to resupply. She asked which star system produced our primary hull alloy. She asked whether Drakari fleet doctrine had changed in the last century. I ended the interview after 12 minutes. I did not execute her. I told my staff I wanted to study her further, which was partly true. The full truth was that she frightened me, and I could not yet explain why. On the bridge of the Eternal Saranthus, with another of my cruisers now burning on the viewport, I was beginning to understand. They are not attacking to destroy us, Drevith said, his voice rising slightly. They are cutting off our retreat vectors. Your Highness, they are trying to surround us. Let them try, said Vice Admiral Orvek from across the bridge. He was old, proud, with campaign ribbons across his chest that dated back 50 years. We have superior firepower on every vessel. They cannot match us ship to ship. They are not fighting us ship to ship, I said quietly. He turned to look at me. They never have, I continued. That is the point. It had taken me an embarrassingly long time to see it. The humans did not line up and fight the way every other species we had ever conquered had done. They did not have our discipline or our centuries of unified tactical doctrine. What they had was something stranger and more dangerous. They improvised. Every battle was different. Every engagement taught them something, and they applied it instantly in the next one. They had no pride in methodology. They had no tradition to protect. They would abandon an entire approach the moment they found a better one, and they found better ones constantly. Our commanders had trained for decades on doctrine developed across 4,000 years of dominance. That doctrine was excellent. It had never failed us. But it had also never been seriously tested, and these humans were testing it in ways that exposed every assumption baked into its foundations. A human ship came screaming in from the upper ecliptic, close enough that I could see the scoring on its hull from previous engagements. It fired 3 short bursts, targeted not at our weapons or engines but at our communications array, then pulled away in a spiral that should not have been aerodynamically possible. How are they maneuvering like that? Orvek demanded. They stripped out their inertial dampeners to lighten the frame and rerouted the power to the maneuvering thrusters, Drevath said, reading from a scan. They made the ships less safe for the crew in order to make them faster in a fight. Orvek stared at him. That is insane. That is a choice, I said. A calculated one. They decided that maneuverability was worth more than crew comfort. Orvek shook his head slowly. No species that valued its own lives would make that trade. They value victory more, I said. That is different from not valuing their lives. Our communications array sputtered and died. The jamming was seamless, total. I felt the ship become an island. I could see my other vessels on visual, but could no longer reach them. Commands would have to go by light signal, slow and limited. And then Dravath said the words that changed everything. Your Highness, the asteroid belt. Something is launching from inside it. Not one thing, not 10 things. Hundreds. The humans had spent 6 months fighting us. Every engagement had seemed like desperate, costly resistance. Every battle had appeared to push them further back. We had assumed we were winning by attrition, wearing them down, breaking their capacity to resist. We had not been watching their hands. We had been watching the hand they wanted us to watch. Inside the asteroid belt, shielded from our scans by mass and cold rock, they had been building. Quietly, quickly, tirelessly. A shipyard unlike anything our intelligence had suggested was possible. New vessels, built in the dark, already crewed, already armed, already coordinated. Launched not in panic but in perfect formation. I stood at the viewport and watched the human fleet emerge from the rocks like something being born. It was larger than mine. Vice Admiral Orvek made a sound I had never heard from a senior Drakari officer. It was very small and very quiet. Signal the fleet, I said. Emergency formation, defensive posture. We cannot signal the fleet, Dravath said. Communications are dark. The lights on the bridge flickered. Then the secondary systems console made a sound like a lock clicking open, and every screen on the bridge briefly displayed a single line of text in Drakari script. It read, "We are inside your network. We have been for 6 hours. We ask that you stand down. No more ships need to be lost today." Nobody spoke. I thought of Fleet Lord Asuvian, back on the command station at the edge of this system. I thought of the Scorched Earth Protocol, the one that would rain fire on every human-inhabited world, regardless of outcome, if he decided the campaign was lost. He had argued for it strongly. I had forbidden it. But Asuvian was old and proud, and he had his own authorization codes. I turned to Dravath. Is Asuvian's command channel still active? Dravath checked. His face tightened. He is transmitting to the bombardment platforms. He is entering authorization codes. Something very cold moved through me. And then all of Asuvian's screens went dark. His transmission cut mid-sequence. The authorization codes died incomplete. The humans had stopped him. They had been inside our system long enough to stop him, and they had chosen to stop him rather than let him act. They had chosen, when they could have let him destroy their worlds, to prevent it. A second message appeared on the bridge screens. It read, "We stopped the bombardment order. We could have let it go through. We chose not to. We are asking again. Please stand down. We want to talk." I stood at the center of my bridge, in the middle of the most catastrophic military defeat in 4,000 years of Drakari history, and I thought about that word. Chose. Not because they had to, not because they were forced to, because they decided it was the right thing to do. I thought about Laura Higgins sitting across from me in the interrogation room, calm and measuring, asking intelligent questions when she should have been terrified. I thought about Marith's voice when she came home with 11 ships. They fight as though losing is simply a delay. I thought about 4,000 years of dominance that had taught us, very slowly and very thoroughly, that we did not need to understand the species we conquered, only to overwhelm them. We had forgotten that understanding an enemy is how you survive one. I looked at Dravath. I looked at Orvek, who was very pale and very still. "Signal the fleet by light code," I said. "All vessels, weapons cold. Hold position." Orvek turned sharply. "Your Highness." "We are not surrendering," I said. "We are pausing. There is a difference. And right now, one of those options ends with our ships in pieces, and 300 million people on our occupied worlds with no fleet to protect them. I choose the option where we still have a fleet." Orvek closed his mouth. I sat down in my command throne, and I typed a response into the communication console, knowing the humans could read it. "I am Princess Valith Saranthus. I am prepared to speak." The response came in less than a minute. "Thank you. We will send someone you already know." An hour later, in the formal reception chamber of the Eternal Saranthus, I watched the airlock cycle open. Laura Higgins walked through it in clean clothes that were not her uniform. Behind her came a taller man with gray at his temples and steady gray eyes, wearing the insignia of a human fleet admiral. His name, I learned, was Admiral Colin Ward. He looked at my reception chamber, at the high ceilings and the carved columns, and the display cases holding 4,000 years of imperial artifacts, and he said, quietly and without mockery, "This is a remarkable ship, Your Highness." "You have done remarkable damage to its fleet," I replied. He nodded. He did not apologize and he did not gloat. "You came to take our home. We couldn't allow that." "You could not have held us off indefinitely," I said. "Your numbers, your technology, your resources, all of them were inferior." "We weren't trying to hold you off indefinitely," he said. "We were trying to hold you off long enough." Laura Higgins, standing slightly to his left, said nothing, but her eyes met mine, and I saw in them the same thing I had seen in that interrogation room 4 months ago. Not triumph, not anger, something far more patient than either. "Long enough for what?" I asked. "Long enough to build," Higgins said. "Long enough to learn. Long enough to make fighting us more expensive than leaving us alone." I was quiet for a moment. "What do you want?" Ward answered without hesitation. "Recognition that this system and its inhabited worlds belong to us, and are not available for colonization. The return of every prisoner taken during this conflict, and a conversation about what a mutual border looks like going forward." "That is all?" "That is all." I studied him. He was not performing. There was no hidden edge in it. They wanted their home recognized, their people returned, and a clear line drawn. They did not want revenge. They did not want tribute. They did not want to come and take what was ours. "You could ask for more," I said, "given today's outcome." "We could," Ward agreed. "We don't want more. We want what I said." I sat with that for a long moment. I thought about Asuvian and his bombardment codes. I thought about my war council and their contempt for a species they had never bothered to actually study. I thought about the 12 ships that never came back and what we told ourselves when they disappeared. Malfunction, trap, anomaly. Anything but the truth. The truth that something small and young and overlooked had looked at our doctrine, found its holes and begun systematically dismantling it. 4,000 years had made us very powerful. They had also made us very slow to see what we did not expect to see. "The prisoners will be returned," I said. "All of them, within the week." Ward nodded once. "The question of sovereignty will require formal treaty process through my government. I cannot sign that alone. But I will carry it back, and I will advocate for it. You have my word. Your word is enough to start with," he said. When the meeting ended and Ward had returned to his shuttle, Higgins lingered at the airlock. I walked with her, which was not a thing I typically did with anyone, let alone with a former prisoner in stained clothes. At the threshold she stopped and turned to look at me one last time. "You have an extraordinary empire," she said. 4,000 years, 300 systems. We read everything we could find about you, the moment we picked up your first signal." "And what did you conclude?" She thought about it, really thought, taking a breath and looking past me at the corridor behind, at the carved walls and the golden lights. "That you hadn't been afraid in a very long time," she said. "And that fear, the right kind of fear, is what keeps you sharp. You'd been so powerful for so long that you'd stopped asking whether things could go wrong. We never had that luxury. Every step we took out into space, we had to ask whether we were ready. We usually weren't. We went anyway and figured it out under pressure." "That sounds exhausting," I said. "It is," she agreed. "It's also why we're still standing." She stepped through the airlock. I stood at the threshold and watched the shuttle disengage from the hull and drift away into the dark, where the human fleet hung in silent formation, enormous and patient and made of rocks and stubbornness and 6 months of quiet work in the dark. I walked back to the bridge alone. Dreveth was at his station. Orvek was sitting in a chair with his hands on his knees, looking at nothing. Neither of them spoke when I entered. I sat in my command throne and looked at the viewport. The human fleet was beginning to slowly draw back, opening space around my vessels. Not an act of submission, an act of courtesy. I thought about going home. I thought about walking into the War Council chamber and facing 30 faces that had spent 4,000 years never losing, who would look at me and need an explanation for how one small species in one small star system had ground our finest fleet down to a defensive crouch in 6 months. I thought about what I would say. Not that we had underestimated them. That was true but shallow. The real answer was that we had never had to estimate them at all. We had never had to truly look at an enemy and think, what do they know that we don't? What are they building while we are watching somewhere else? What are they willing to sacrifice that we assumed no one would sacrifice? We had sent 12 ships and assumed the answer was nothing. We were wrong in a way that cost us dearly and taught us something we could not have learned any other way. I pulled up the holographic map of our empire. 300 golden lights spread across the stars like a crown. and at the edge of it, one pale blue-green light, small and stubborn. Now with a border I was going to have to go home and argue should be respected. I did not feel defeated. I felt, for the first time in decades, genuinely awake. I opened a channel to the human fleet. Ward answered quickly. "I have a question," I said. "Not a political one, a personal one." He waited. "How do you train your people to keep going when the odds are that bad? When 12 of our ships could destroy one of yours? When our empire is 1,000 times older than your civilization?" Ward was quiet for a moment. Behind him, I could see the bridge of his vessel, humans moving at stations, calm and purposeful. "We don't train them to ignore the odds," he said finally. "We train them to work the problem, to find the one thing the odds didn't account for, and go after it hard. The odds never account for everything. There's always something the stronger side didn't expect, because the stronger side stopped expecting to be surprised." "We stopped expecting to be surprised," I said. "Yes," he said. "You did." I closed the channel. Outside the viewport, his fleet continued its slow, patient withdrawal. Every move they made was deliberate and unhurried. They had all the time in the world. They had proven it. I turned to Drevith. "Set a course for home." He began entering the coordinates. I sat back in my throne and looked one more time at the pale blue-green light on my map. It was so small. It had no right to be there, unchanged and sovereign, after everything we had brought to bear on it. But it was there, and it was going to stay there. I thought about Higgins on her way out, the steadiness in her eyes, the total absence of a need to be congratulated for surviving. I thought about Ward's voice. The stronger side stopped expecting to be surprised. I had built my entire life inside an empire that had not been surprised in 4,000 years. I had worn that history like armor. I had never once asked what it might be doing to us from the inside, hollowing out the instincts that had made us great in the first place. Now I knew. The eternal Ceranthes turned toward home, carrying the weight of a lesson that no amount of firepower could have taught us any other way. Behind us, the asteroid belt was already going dark again, the human fleet slipping back into the rocks, and the cold, and the patient dark, already thinking about what came next. They were always thinking about what came next. That, I understood now, was the thing about them that no weapon could touch and no doctrine could answer. They never, not for a single moment, believed it was over.